Welcome to my channel. This video is a watercolor and chat, and the topic of the day is going to be James Addie. So Molly Watson was discovered dead April 27, 2018, 2 days before her wedding. She was a 35-year-old mother, and she was a mother of a son who had special needs. She has a brother and an infant sister, and she worked at the behavioral center in Moberly, and she had also an indie nail polish business. The area her body was found was in a remote area in Monroe County. It was east of Highway 151 and Route M. It is in an Amish area, and the road is along a creek in a town called Middletown. The area is about 4 miles away from Madison. So this is going to be approximately 20 minutes away from where she lives. Now, the day that she was found, there was a witness, Glenn McSparron, who he was driving through the creek. He was taking the shortcut through the creek because he was tired. He was dropping off his daughter to his mother's place, and he wanted to get in and get out quickly. When he was going to his mother's, he noticed that there was 2 cars in the creek. So he said, "Is someone down there?" And the car that was headed towards him was shining the light in his eyes, and they were saying, "I don't know where they're at. It's going to be a while," which is kind of a weird statement. And he remembered that because it seemed a little weird, and also because the guy seemed a little suspicious. So he wasn't able to see the guy's face because of the glare in his eyes from the car, but he was able to determine that this sounded and appeared like an older white male. He kept on going, and the other car had drove over the embankment when they were leaving, which caused striations in their car. And one of the things that McSparron had noticed also was the car was having a difficult time like backing out of the area. So McSparron had left, and of course he went through the same area about 20 minutes later, and he noticed there was still 1 car in the creek. He went over by the car, and that's when he noticed a woman laying in front of the car, which was identified as Molly Watson. Let's talk a little bit about James Addie. Okay, so Molly Watson was supposed to marry James Addie April 29, 2021. Addie and Watson met at their job at Mulberry Correction Center when they were both correction officers. Watson had left to pursue a career in counseling. Addie and Watson had went on vacations together, which included Disney World and Cancun. They spoke to each other daily. They had everything they needed to have done for this wedding. The venue was picked out. They were going to have it at Stony Creek Inn Hotel. The seating charts were planned, centerpieces created, which Molly created herself, and she had not 1 but 3 dresses and a specialty made hanger that said Mrs. Addie on it. They had the marriage license, and they had the wedding registry, and the wedding website stated the ceremony information. So everything was prepared and planned for April 29th. James Addie, her fiancé, was 54 years old, but he was still married to his wife of 22 years. Melanie Addie, his wife, or ex-wife now, is a teaching assistant in Mexico Public School in Mexico, Missouri. They lived in a 3-bedroom home. They had 2 children, a son who was in college and a daughter who was in high school. When the police officers went to tell Addie about the death of his fiancée, that's when they learned that he was actually still married. So he did admit to the officers he was having an affair, and he went ahead and handed over the cell phone he used only to communicate with Watson. So he had stated he hadn't seen her since April 24th, but he did speak to her that night, which was like maybe around 8, and he was home by 8:30 p.m. So Addie's wife, she didn't know when he returned home because she was sleeping. She had went to bed at 7:30 p.m. and she knows he was home at 2 a.m. because he snores. When she heard him snoring, she had moved to the couch, and that was like 2 o'clock in the morning. So she knows he was there at that time, but between 7 and 2, she couldn't tell you where he was. She also said he had parked in the garage, and he doesn't typically park in the garage, so it was a little weird that he did that. And she claimed that after they got off of work, they had met for dinner, and which actually they live in Mexico, Missouri, so they had went to dinner in Mexico, and then they went home. He left the house at 7 p.m. and she stated he was wearing a black jacket, blue jeans, and boots. The investigator never found those clothing items, by the way, so those clothes are still missing. He said he went to Cairo, Missouri, which is about 45 minutes drive from his home. His friend wasn't there, and he returned, putting him back in the house at 8:30. His daughter testified he arrived home at 10 p.m. So she was doing online classes. Remember, this was COVID, so she was in high school, but she was doing online classes at this moment because all the students were at home. And she was a little late turning in her homework, and it was due that night. So she was trying to finish this up. So when he came home, she was still up doing this homework. She had brushed her teeth, and while she was brushing her teeth, he went to the bathroom and stood in the doorway in just his underwear, and then he left. So while he was waiting to take his shower, he was washing his clothes, and she noticed that when she was leaving the bathroom that it smelled like bleach, and she didn't really think too much about it at the time, but she did notice the smell. So let's go back to Addie and Molly. Now, Addie and Molly, they did go on trips, like I said before. They have vacations, and one of them was to Florida because they went to Disney World. And when he went to Disney World, his wife stated that he said he was going to sniper training. He even had documents that would look like legitimate documents for sniper training for Disney. Well, it wasn't Disney World, but for Florida. So she believed, of course, he was going to do his sniper training. And she also testified that he had went to Cancun with his coworkers. So some of his coworker friends, they had went to Disney World, which isn't Cancun, which isn't completely false, because she was one of his coworkers. I don't think she was his coworker at that time, but is not a complete far stretch from the truth. Now, Watson was found with her shirt up close to her neck due to her being dragged, and they also found Watson's cell phone and a bloody t-shirt on the side of the road between the crime scene and Addie's home. So if you were leaving the crime scene and you were heading towards Addie's direction, that's where you would find these items in the road. And it seemed as if he was driving and probably tossed it out the window. The shirt was discovered to be a custom-made shirt his daughter had made for Addie in her graphic design course. Now, actually, she didn't make it specifically for him, but she had made these shirts and she messed up. It was just completely wrong. So she kind of gave it to him and kind of gave it to her family. She was supposed to own one. Mom owns one. Dad owns one. And they kept it in the garage, and it was going to be used for rags because it was incorrect. It was a mistake t-shirt. And that shirt was the shirt that was supposed to be in the garage along with the other two shirts. And the shirt was covered with Watson's DNA, which was blood splatter. And I believe it was 42 blood splatters on there. And it also had gunshot residue. Now, let's talk a little bit about Melanie and James Addie, and as far as their marriage is concerned, or at least what she testified to. So I did mention that James and Molly had went on vacation on 2 occasions, and the wife stated that she too had went on a couple of trips without him, but he did not like when she went on trips because he feared that she would have the opportunity to have an affair. No comment. James and Melanie would argue at times over money because she wanted him to be more responsible, but she wasn't controlling, as the defense was trying to imply, or not imply, but directly state. And she described their marriage as good and bad. It was just a typical marriage that has its ups and downs, but it seemed like he tried to make the marriage work. So she didn't have any idea that he was cheating, and she wasn't aware that he had a whole separate phone that he used to communicate with Watson. She also said she had went through their things after the officers had came and she found out about Molly Watson. She decided to do a little digging to find out if she could find anything in the home. And so she was looking in the garage, in the loft, and she had noticed that there was a locked chest that had Watson's things and also a photo album that had pictures of Addie and Watson on vacation. So just proof. Okay. So let's go to April 22nd. And I'm going to say this word for word. There was a letter that Watson had sent to her wedding planner. It was an email, but same thing. So I spoke to James, and we're going to kind of have to wing it and hope he's able to make it. I think his ex-wife or kid's mother passed over the weekend after a car accident at Christmas. So he's all over the place helping his kids through this and taking care of things for them as well as the wedding. Would you be available tomorrow around 6:30, Tuesday around the same time? Let me know. And she goes into her availability and saying that the wedding day timeline list is attached. Okay, so Addie had told Watson that his wife was in a car accident around Christmas, New Year's time frame, so end of 2017, early 2018, and she had died in April, which is the month they're getting married. So this prompted them to have to cut all the guests on his side. So his family and friends couldn't go because his ex-wife died and they're going to be going to the funeral. Now, Molly probably seemed a little suspicious because she was searching for her obituary, and she did search for Melanie Shepard, Shepard being the maiden name of his ex-wife, supposed ex-wife at this particular time. And she couldn't find anything, and did ask him about this, was like, okay, did the funeral already happen? Or, I can't find, well, I don't think she said she couldn't find anything, but she was just wondering if the funeral already happened and he just didn't know. And he was like, no, the funeral is, this weekend or whatever. And he wasn't really giving a lot of information about this, but she kind of just went along. But she did send messages to him stating that she thinks he's not wanting to go through with the plans. Like, he doesn't seem like he's on board like he used to be. So he does appear that he has cold feet, or maybe he's planning to back out. And it wasn't really clear what he stated in response, but they were working things out. Now, did she know that he was married before? Because they were in a relationship for 7 years. So did she know that while they were together, he was married? And the answer is yes. She did know. And that was because when they went to go get their marriage certificate, he and her were asked when they were married last and how many marriages they had before. And he has stated he was married 4 times before. This will be his 5th wedding. And he was divorced October 2017, which is a couple months before his wife supposedly died. And she had said this was her 2nd marriage. So she knew at one point in time that he was legally married while they're together. And I really don't know what kind of excuses he made. Another thing, too, is that the girlfriend, Molly, did meet his daughter back in 2017 because she needed some custom made thing done. I can't remember what it was. And he had taken her to Molly, but he introduced her as a friend. So I am not too sure if they had that conversation later on. Like, okay, why did you introduce me as a friend? Or what does this mean? Or whatever. But that's what happened. So I don't know. But let's get to the day of the murder. Actually, before we get to the day of the murder, another thing that was also a little odd too, if the son and the daughter was supposed to be going, their tux and their dresses were not measured yet. So it also seemed a little odd that they didn't even come in for any fittings. So yeah. Now let's get back to the day of the murder. April 27th, 2018, the day that Watson had died. Addie had paid the remaining $4,000 for the wedding. So there was $4,000 remaining. He paid it, meaning that it's all set to go. Everything's paid. We're good. And starting around like 5:30 p.m., we see that he started sending himself a series of text messages saying, having a meeting at 8 p.m., normal place, bring those manuals. So this looks like he was creating a fake alibi. So supposedly his friend who's in Cairo, Missouri, is sending him these messages, and he's going to be meeting this friend. And since his friend is in Cairo, Missouri, that's about 46 minutes away from where he lives, meaning that, okay, it will make sense for him to leave at 7 p.m., which is the time that his wife noticed that he left. Okay, now from 8:05 to 8:26, you see that there's messages from Addie to Watson. Now, the drive from where he lives to the location where Watson was found is about 40 minutes. So if he went straight there, or at least almost straight there, that means he would have already been in this location by this time. But regardless, he's sending her messages and he calls her at 8:26 and she calls him back 3 minutes later at 8:30 p.m. Then we see that based on her tracking for her insurance, that she was on the phone for 22 minutes with him and the drive was 22 minutes long. So the time it took from her to get from her house to him and the time that their phone call just coincided exactly at the same time, which is the 22 minutes. And then we see at 8:52:90 seconds that she arrives, and from 8:54 on, there's no longer any activity on her phone. And we see for him, there's no activity on his phone after 8:53 p.m. for 40 minutes. So for that time frame, we don't know what he's doing. We don't know where he's at, per se. We don't know what's going on. He cannot account for those 40 minutes. He's not at his friend's, and he was trying to say he was at the house, but his daughter stated that he arrived at 10 p.m. So he had the opportunity to kill her. So Addie then calls Watson 4 times between 10:08 and 10:26 that night. And he also sends her messages, and she didn't respond. She didn't text him back or anything. She didn't text him. She didn't call him, none of that. And then he just went to bed. And the next day, that's when the officers came and spoke to them. Now, when she had left her home, she had left in pajama pants, a tank top, and no bra. So keep in mind, this location is a remote area close to a creek, and this is at nighttime. So the likelihood of her meeting some random person at night with her pajamas, a tank top, and no bra is highly unlikely unless she's comfortable with this person. And chances are it's him, because he is the last person that spoke to her. They did speak during that time, and it just coincides very well with each other. And how is it that it's just radio silence from him on his end? Like if he was home, he could have been doing other things, looking up scores or something, surfing on his phone, talking to other friends. You know, why was he completely silent for 40 minutes? So it just seems like it was just too much evidence, or not evidence, but coincidence on that end, as far as the timing lining up so well. Now, McSparron, the guy that originally had found Molly Watson in front of her car, he had saw her at 10:05 p.m. So at 10:05, when they had already found the body and it was discovered, Watson had just been in the house for a few minutes at that point in time, and then he was like sending these messages or whatever at this time. So they had already found the body, and he probably didn't know at that point in time that they did, but him sending the messages and him calling really doesn't help his case at all. It doesn't do anything for him, and it just doesn't make any sense for him to do that. The evidence that they had was the ammunition box. Okay, so it seems that he had ammunition that didn't match any of the weapons that he had in the house, but that particular ammunition did match the gun box that was thrown out of the window alongside the other items on that road. And the defense stated, well, maybe it was someone else's because there's hunters that go by there, so it could have been theirs. And that's true, it could be. But again, it's just too many coincidences, and it just seemed like, I don't know. Also, there was a rifle that was against the wall in the garage that was missing, and we don't know if that ammunition matches that rifle because it's gone. It's gone, it's missing, along with his clothing that he wore. So my guess is that it's very possible he was wearing this, and because he was wearing like a long sleeve jacket, it like maybe he had tried to put the shirt on over it to see if he can kind of cover the blood splatter as much as possible. And then he took it off, but he realized that, okay, his clothes is still damaged, so that he went ahead and gotten rid of those two. It's very possible. There's still about like 15 to 20 minutes that he could have had in order to drag her body to the car and also discard of the items. So we really don't know like what he did with the other stuff. And again, the boots are missing, the pants are missing, the gun is missing. You know, he dumped them somewhere, and probably somewhere between the crime scene and his home. He could have turned down a road real quick, dumped it, and went on his business. And who knows, it might be in the junkyard somewhere. Now, the tire cast match. The tire cast that they found in the dirt, in the mud, over at the crime scene matched Addie's truck. Or it's not a truck, it's a car. And the tire cast matching was scrutinized heavily. So the defense pretty much got down on the poor forensic scientist. I kind of felt sorry for him, stating that, okay, well, do you have any number measurements to say that this matches, and whatever the case may be? Is there a margin of error? And the forensic scientist stated there's no error rate or margin of error because there's no margin of error in forensic science. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what he said. And he said they tabulate the error rate from the proficiency test, and there's no ground truth that has been created. Now, based on the way that he was explaining this, I'm assuming ground truth means that there weren't a bunch of tests on these tires to be able to state, okay, this is what we should be looking for. Like, this is how we're going to determine that this is definitely his tire for his car, which to me makes sense based on my background. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but I do want to note that they did check to see if this brand matches the brand for that car first. So they were able to determine, like, okay, these are the same brands. And then after they figured that out, then they went and they found 11 unique identifying marks from the tire cast that matches the tire. So they wanted to make sure that first the branding matched. They didn't want to just go in there and be like, okay, we're just going to look and match up these tires. They had to be at least the same type of tires first. And the unique markings are usually created when you drive that vehicle. So each car should have their own unique markings. It shouldn't be exactly the same for every single car. And the car is a maroon 2000 Mercury Sable, which kind of matches what McSparron was saying, which is like, it's an old, it looks like a dark vehicle. And I cannot remember the type that he confused it with, but it does match the Mercury Sable. So it sounds in line with each other. And again, coincidence, what's the likelihood that she's out there meeting an older man that happens to have a dark vehicle that's similar to his vehicle in the middle of the night in a remote area? It's just highly unlikely. It's just too many coincidences. So I did want to talk a little bit about margin of error in hopes to kind of explain it so that people may be able to understand. I don't want to completely sound like a nerd, but I did want to talk about this. So I'm an epidemiologist, and I'm going to try and explain this in layman's terms, but I wanted to explain margin of error to kind of really get into, not really get into, but to explain why I believe it was a horrible question. And unfortunately, the jury may have been misled with this question. Okay, so let me explain margin of error. Let's pretend you're a teacher and you have 1,000 students. You create a quiz, and based on your studies of the quizzes that you created, you state that 800 students will get an A on this quiz. So your confidence interval for this is 95%, which makes the z-score 1.68. Don't worry if you don't know what a z-score is. It's fine. The statistics. All right. So with your confidence interval, this means that if you were to do this test 100 times, there's a 95% chance that the results will be what you determined. Okay. In this case, that means that if you do this experiment 100 times, your students will get an A, or 800 students will get an A 95% of the time. Okay. So what is the margin of error? Well, the margin of error is usually taken from the sample of the population. The population here is your 1,000 students. So you're going to grab a sample. Let's pretend the sample is 300 students, and you are going to find out of these 300 students, because you already pulled it, you already did this experiment, you're going to find that out of these 300 students, 75% of them got an A. That's 225 students. They got an A, right? So you did the calculations for the margin of error here, you put it in, and boom, it comes out that your margin of error is 5%. So you use the sample, which we had here, 75% got an A. You're going to subtract 5%, which gives you 70, and you're going to add 5%, which gives you 80%. And you're going to say that there is a 95% chance that 70 to 80% of your students will make an A. That's a margin of error. Why I felt like this was a misleading question is because you need a population, and then you need a sample from the population in order to create a margin of error. The actual formula needs that information. It just does. And you need a standard of deviation as well. So you can't just create this error of margin just from one person. You don't have a population of one with a sample of one. It doesn't work that way. So there isn't going to be an error of margin for James Addie's specific tire, because he's the only one that will have that tire that can create that marking for his car. Now they can do it for the brands. They can be like, okay, this particular brand will create this particular track, and based on thousands of tires that we tested, that it is a 99% probability that this type of tire will create this type of track. They can do that, and they can give you the broad general overview of the type of tire. But to state definitively, or at least almost definitively, that this is his tire is completely different, because the unique identifier is kind of like, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. It's kind of like I guess you could say it's kind of like your fingerprint to a certain extent. Or no, a better one is your signature. Your signature. The best way to describe it is your signature. There's thousands of signatures, but only you have your signature. They can sit there and be like, okay, a lot of these signatures show that when people write like this is stressed, when there's a little indentation here, that they're probably writing with their left hand, and they can probably do studies to get these kind of data. But to state that this is your signature compared to another one that we see here, like this is your signature, we knew that you wrote this, compared to your original signatures, they can't really have a margin of error, because you are the population, you are the sample. So it's kind of misleading, and I'm kind of glad that it didn't confuse, or I hope it didn't confuse the jury too much, because I'm going to applaud the defense for doing this, because if you don't really understand this and you don't have statistics as your background at all, you're not going to be looking at this like, oh my gosh, like he's just being misleading right now. You probably be like, oh my God, you need a margin of error. No, you don't. You actually don't need a margin of error on this. It wouldn't match. It wouldn't go. It doesn't make any sense for his tire only. Like no, absolutely not. And I don't want to rant, but I'm ranting. Okay. I don't like when they mislead the jury, and oftentimes, or I don't want to say often, it's not often, but sometimes defense attorneys do this, and they do this in order to cast doubt. It's smart on their end, but it does irk me a little bit, because I feel like it's a little shady. But I'm going to get off this topic. I have a little rant, and I'm moving on. Okay, so that was my layman's term. I tried to break it down as simple as possible. I hope I did not confuse you guys. If I did, I am so sorry. All right, so the jury did consist of 9 women and 6 men, and they did find James Addie guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. Armed criminal action just means that he committed the crime with a gun. And he got 20 years for the armed criminal action, but they still haven't sentenced him for the first-degree murder yet. But if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, I believe in Missouri, it's an automatic life sentence for murder, but I did not look it up. I read that somewhere, and sometimes articles could be wrong. So chances are high, based on what I've read, that he will be getting life in prison, but I could be wrong. So that is all the information I have about James Addie. I am very interested to know what you guys think. There was a lot of questions in my head going on when I listened to this trial, and I didn't get to see the whole entire thing, just bits and pieces from Court TV. And one of the questions I had was like, why did he propose to her? Like, if you did not want to go through this marriage, why did you propose? Secondly, once you proposed, the wedding was set and all this, why didn't you go ahead and just end it? Why did you even wait all the way until 2 days prior to the wedding to then kill her? And it's just like you took away this woman from her son, from her family, and for what? For what? And on top of that too, it also doesn't make any sense that he would do this, because if it was like, oh, I don't want to do this because I'm already married, okay, but if you kill her, which he did, then the police are going to show up at your door because you are showing to be engaged on the website. Your information is on the website. So they're going to find you and they're going to be like, hey, just to notify you, your fiance is dead. So they're going to come to your house. So for it to be a way to save his marriage or not to get discovered is not, to me, that wouldn't even be a good reason. It just seemed like it was a completely selfish act. And instead of just going ahead and allowing her to live her life and probably be able to go on and find someone better, he decided to take her life away. And that just doesn't make any sense. It was just the most senseless act possible. And I hope he regrets it till the day he dies. Like, I really do, because it's just not right. It's not right at all. Another thing that I also didn't understand too was after he claimed that his wife and him were divorced, which should have been October 27th based on what he stated. How did she allow him to kind of get away with not staying over? Did he stay over? And how did he get away with staying over and the wife not knowing, or wife not questioning it? Like, he told lies upon lies upon lies. We already know this. Well, what kind of lies could he have stated? And, this was going on for 7 years. And it also makes me question the relationship too. Like, there's all kinds of married couples, and I've seen the married couples that have been married for well over a decade that do everything together. They don't do anything apart. Like, there's no way that they can cheat on each other because they do everything together. There is no boys' night out, girls' night out type of thing going on. They go wherever they need to go together. The only time they're not going to do things together is if, like, one family, like, say for example, the husband's mom is ill, then he may go to his mom if it's like out of state or something, and then if the wife may go to lunch with a girlfriend. But for the most part, that's a rare kind of thing. So I've seen those couples, and then I see the ones that they kind of do everything apart and they just coexist. So I don't know about their marriage, but I'm assuming it was more of a coexisting type of marriage where he can do what he needs to do, she can do what she needs to do, and they trust each other to be doing whatever it is they claim that they're doing. He can go and come whenever he pleases, and she can kind of do the same, and it's not that big of a deal. And I do see that a little bit more commonly with some marriages where they were together for maybe 15, 20 years, and they just don't have a ton of things. Like, maybe they're very different to a certain extent. Like, one person maybe likes to be into books and staying at home, and the other person's more extroverted and like to do outdoor stuff. I see it more so in those kind of couples because their social activity is very different. So anything is possible. I really don't know, but it's sad because he ruined two families. He ruined Molly Watson's family and he ruined his family. And then his daughter and the wife had to testify. And she did not know. The wife did not know about this woman at all. The daughter had met her before, but she was introduced as a friend. So she just thought, this girl was a friend. She didn't know he was in a relationship. And again, the wife had no idea he was having a whole nother relationship. And on top of that he was getting married in 2 days. So to find out at a time where police officers are knocking on your door, asking you, who are you? Because they came there to let Addie know that his fiance is dead, had passed away. It's just is not the best time to get the news. But you see, he probably didn't suspect that she would be found that quickly. And it was because of that man that happened to be going through that creek. You know, he happened to go back the same way and he saw her. And so she was discovered very quickly. So I'm guessing he probably expected her to be out there longer. And so maybe he would have been able to do the cleanup or whatever. I don't know, but it would have looked very, very suspicious either way, because y'all were getting married very soon and then boom, you know, she just magically winds up dead. And it's also weird and not common because, again, usually the men kill the wife because the wife is the one that they're married to. They may have to pay alimony, child support, it may be a custody battle and all kinds of stuff. And again, they're selfish, so they do that. Whereas in this case, he could have just told Molly Watson, like, hey, I don't want to go through this anymore, and he didn't. There was absolutely zero reason for him to do what he did. It's just completely senseless. Completely senseless. So I'm sorry for the family. It's just a horrible thing to experience. But I do want to know your thoughts down below. What do you think? What is your opinion as far as why he did the things that he did? And, you know, just go ahead and write your topics or other questions you may have. Thank you very much. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day.